Welcome, everybody, to the May installment of the Santa Clarita International Film Festival's, also known as SCIF, Director's Cut. The Director's Cut is a monthly interview series where the founder and executive director, me, interviews the directors, past directors of SCIF award winners. And joining me this month is Jeff Stolhand. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
Okay. Yep. Who is the director of the winner in the SCIF 2022 season's Best Short Horror, They Never See It Coming. So Jeff, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
I appreciate the invitation.
So again, congratulations. I'm not sure if you were there to accept the trophy. I know
I was there. Yep.
You were awesome.
Yep.
Okay. That was great. I'll have to go through the video footage and find you.
Sure.
But let's start with entering into SCIF. What drew you to the festival? Why did you decide to take a chance on us, considering we're only going into year 3, and when you entered, it was year 2?
Sure. Well, there's so many film festivals out there now. When I started entering film festivals, I was looking at films that had a fan base.
Mm-hmm.
There are two ways you can do it. You can throw for the, go for the brass ring and try to get into a Sundance or a Telluride or, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Which is difficult. But the other option, in my opinion, is to look for festivals that either have been around for a long time, that have a good fan base, or they're upcoming festivals that have good buzz and a good fan base. And you had actually reached out to me personally. I don't know if you recall, but you sent me an email as soon as I started getting on Film Freeway. And I thought, wow, for someone to actually reach out and make contact and say, hey, this is a film we'd like to take a look at. I thought, well, this festival has got something different going on, because you don't normally get that. I've only had that happen a handful of times. And so when I looked at the festival and read all the articles, I'm like, wow, this looks good. So that's kind of how it started.
Awesome. Well, yeah. And for those who don't know, I actually do go through Film Freeway. I look through the trailers. So I would highly suggest, people have asked me a lot, how does a film festival pick, right? And again, we are very different. We're very new. So it might not be the answer in 10 years. But I just want to call out, the trailer is what really caught me. So,
interesting.
For those of you who are, wondering, how do I catch a person's attention? We personally had 275 submissions, I think, last year. And, it's really hard. We do screen every single one. Every single one is in competition, but that trailer makes all the difference in the world. It's a visual, quick representation of your project. And if your trailer locks you, just like anything else, just like a big movie, right? When you see that trailer, you go, that's something that looks really interesting to me. And I reached out. So that being said, Jeff, tell me about They Never See It Coming. Obviously, I have a little bit of inside information.
Sure.
So tell the viewers what it's about, what inspired you to make this project.
Right. So I had the idea knocking around in my head for a while, and I was going to write it as a short story originally. And I had met an actor by the name of Jeff Weber from another project, and he and I became friends. And Jeff kept saying, we need to do something together. We need to do something. We got to do something. And Jeff gets a lot of national print and commercial work. He's a good looking guy. He always plays that, father or cowboy or husband. And he's like, I want to do something. I got to do something different. And I thought of that short story idea. And I said, well, this is different. So I said, I got something for you. And I rewrote it as a short film. It's basically, the pitch on it is, it's about a serial killer who kidnaps a young girl and wants her to follow in his footsteps.
Right.
And he's convinced, he's convinced that the young girl is his daughter.
Got it. Okay. I was like, am I giving anything away by saying that?
No, that's fine. And so I wrote the short story, or the screenplay version of that, and I gave it to Jeff, and he's like, ooh, this is really interesting. We definitely got to do this. But it's really a three-hander kind of film without the other two characters he's playing off of. It's just not going to work. And yeah, it just felt like we couldn't do it unless we found the right other two characters, particularly the girl that plays the daughter. And Jeff is good friends with a gentleman named Marco Perella, he's like the go-to acting coach in Texas, in Austin. And he's a good actor. He's a great acting teacher. And Jeff said, we're trying to figure out how to cast these other two people. And Marco said, well, print the script and I'll run it through my class. And so he actually invited us out to his class. He had sides for all the students, and all of them were fantastic. They were all really good. He's got a lot of great talent in that class. There's a man named Dan Roman who wasn't in my film, but he's very talented. It's just so many great people. And they were all good. But when Henry and Melanie, who I ended up casting, read in the class, I was really blown away. I mean, Melanie, she's really talented and she nailed it right off the bat. I gave her one little adjustment and she just picked it up immediately and she just banged it out. And Henry, so she's really talented. Obviously, Melanie, actually, out of all the shorts and the features at Skiff, she won Best Actress. So yes, clearly I made the right choice. And then Henry, he's an interesting actor as well. He's got a really good sense of his body language, his physicality, which is interesting, because he spends most of the movie, tied up.
That's right.
But I would say, I need a little body language this way. I need a little body language, give me some English on just because most of his is just physical.
Right.
And he's just really good at that.
And he's like, I can't move. I got ropes around me.
Yeah, exactly. So once we cast Henry, and particularly once we had Melanie, I thought, okay, we've got a movie here. So we cast him and we went out and shot it. And a friend of mine who I've hired to do music before, named Stephen Bennett, a really good composer. He came on board to do the music, and he did some really interesting things. He recorded sounds in the trunks of cars, and because the whole thing's out in the field by this crazy looking van. And when I talked to Stephen, I said, I only have one bit of music in mind for this monologue that we do. Just kind of a tone. Other than that, I don't have anything, which is unusual. I usually edit to a temp track, which some composers like, some composers don't. And so he just started kind of thinking out of the box and doing these weird rhythms and sounds like cars squeaking, and he would incorporate that into the music. Once it's there, you kind of go, it's really interesting to listen to.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go listen to it again, because I didn't. Yeah, it's without that nuance, I didn't go.
It's really, he does some really cool stuff. And then my friend Andrew, who I work with a lot, he helped me edit and do the sound design. And yeah, I guess that's the long answer, I suppose.
No. This is great. I mean, this is, because everyone wants to know the kind of the creative journey. And I personally think that the story about the creative process is just as interesting as the story itself, right?
Sure.
So Austin based, right? You guys shot in Austin.
Right.
Tell me what the shoot was like.
Oh gosh. Since it's all a dialogue driven, isolated location, the first question was, where do we want to shoot? Because we didn't really have a specific, originally it was going to be, at night in the middle of nowhere, just, campfire or something like that. But I just didn't think that was visual enough. And we talked about parking garages and abandoned buildings and warehouses and bridges. And then when I found this cool van, this yellow van, I thought, that's interesting. And then Jeff Weber came up with these glasses that have a yellow tint. And so we started to get this kind of weird yellow theme.
Yellow thing going.
It's just sort of
your tone accident. Even. Yeah. The tone of the movie is a little bit like that yellow, warm feel to it.
Right.
At least that's what I thought. So.
Right. No, it is. And so then we started thinking about movies like No Country for Old Men, or movies that are, deserty and, and so we found a ranch outside of Austin that had these beautiful rolling hills and dead grass and all this kind of stuff and landscape behind it. And so we thought, well, we'll do it out there. And so if you want to know some practical things,
yes,
we did,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is all about the making of, the creating of, the things that went wrong and how we put it back together.
Yeah. So the ranch is gorgeous. And where I wanted to shoot was down this huge slope. They had this cool tree arcing. I was going to put the van there, but you had to get to it by going over this little ravine and the water.
Mhm.
And we were scouting the location, and I thought we could only be there for one day. And I thought that's going to be tough. And closer to the house, they had a guest house that had electricity and bathrooms and
Mhm.
places for makeup, and the people were great. They said just take it, use it, just to have fun. Didn't charge us anything. And
That's the difference
so
between Texas and California. In
yeah,
California,
yeah.
Texas
I've
is
got
like,
a
y'all have fun now. In California, it's like, how much can we make off
yeah,
of that?
exactly. But there was an equally beautiful view, just didn't have the tree and some of the little pieces I wanted, that was right up near that other house. And we said, let's just do it here. We can park right here. Everybody can just come in. They can hang out in the house. They've got, it was very cold. They
Mhm.
had, heat and food and whatever. So we just started, it was as my DP called it, Robert Matthews, really talented guy. He said, this is a grip and electric shoot. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, you got a shiny car in Texas sun. He says, what do you
Yeah.
think I mean? And
Yeah.
so he built all of these, 12 by 12, all these flags and everything. And so we just, wherever we shot, we just rotated,
With the
this
sun.
giant,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that we could soften everything up, keep everybody's, skin
Yeah.
pretty. And because,
You're not blown out and stuff. That was actually one of my questions, like, how
right.
did you keep it not blown out? Because what it looked like to me was it was just out in the open, and everyone knows that on a short budget or small budget, you're chasing the light at that
Right.
point in time. So I was actually very curious, is
Eh,
like, did you do it in sections, or did you just do it in one day, or how did that work?
Well, the van shoot was one day, and then the opening bits with there's kind of a little opening sequence in a bar and some of those things we did on another day, like a half day.
Mm-hmm.
And but the van, yeah, so Robert just built, and you can't tell because the sounds amazing, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy windy. There was so much, I mean, the 4x4 or the 12x12s were blowing over. We were having guys hold grip stands, because it was crazy windy that day. And you can actually see it in Melanie's monologue when her hair is kind of going around, and it looks
Mm-hmm.
awesome. The wind was, just gave us that extra sort of
Extra
turmoil in the
character,
scene.
with
Yeah, and
more
Henry's
depth.
hair is
Yeah,
going
yeah, yeah, yeah.
around, and so again, so Robert built this set of flags and so forth that we just danced around wherever we were shooting, and just kind of chased the sun that way. And then my friend Leslie Alexander did all the blood effects and the makeup and everything, and she was great. And so yeah, it was just a one day shoot on the van, and then half day for the other stuff.
Cool. So obviously we talked a little bit about, kind of the challenges, but nothing ever goes according to plan on a
Right,
shoot.
right.
So what are some of the issues other than the wind and the light, right? Which were the obvious that, I mean, I'm talking I'm talking post, what are the challenges that especially as an independent, right? I mean, we don't have, as independent creators, we don't have big budget money. So,
Right.
what are some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you and the crew and the producers and everybody just overcome? Like, what were some of the?
Yeah, I think the first challenge was, well, obviously cast. I mean, Jeff's great. I knew he would be great, but finding Melanie and Henry was key. And like I said, once I saw Melanie's performance, I knew we could do it. Then the next step was, how do we make it cinematic? And so the location that I talked about was key, and trying to figure that out. In terms of big problems, I think there were only a couple of hurdles on set. One of them was just running out of time chasing the sun, because we did shoot from the moment the sun came up we got our last shot off just as it got too dark. So, chasing time is always tough. I can't think of anything too crazy though that was that difficult. Yeah, I may think of something later, but I
I was
don't.
about to say, so then
Yeah,
the gods were with you, because I mean,
yeah.
most people are just not like, oh yeah, there was nothing except normally it's like, this broke, that didn't work,
Yeah,
this person didn't show up.
yeah.
Yeah. So So cool. So talk to me. You also edited. That's what I heard, right?
Yep,
You
yep.
and so tell me about the editing process. Obviously, as a director who's also an editor, it's a little bit different in terms of what you're looking for or what you're thinking of. So kind
Yeah.
of talk to me about that process and like, did you already know what you were trying to put together? I mean, obviously you talked about sound being a part
Right.
of it, but you know, are you already cutting the movie in your head as you're shooting it? Like what's the process?
No, that's a really great question, and that actually does bring up an issue we ran into that we had to fix. So I'll try to answer both. Um, First of all, I've been editing forever. I edit all my stuff, and so I storyboard everything out. I know exactly what I'm going to shoot before I shoot it. With wiggle room, if something fun
Mhm.
comes up or there's a happy accident, you can change that.
Right.
As we were chasing the sun and knowing that we were going to run out of time, my wife Dee Dee was script supervisor on it, and I took her aside and I said, "I don't think we're going to get all this done. So we have to figure out how to move this one segment quickly." And so we were brainstorming while they were resetting, and it's the scene, and it's actually so much better because we did it this way.
Mhm.
There's a scene where Jeff, it's getting to the climax, and he's takes the two characters and he's manhandling them, and he's given his last kind of big hurrah on why you need to do this thing I'm asking you to do, which is a
Mhm.
horrible, 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 horrible thing.
Mhm.
And I told Robert, and Dee Dee and I talked about it, and I talked to Robert, and I said, we're just going to do this whole thing handheld in one. I had it storyboarded where we got
Mhm.
wide, medium, over the shoulder, all this stuff, and I said we don't
Mhm.
have time for
Mhm.
that, and it actually worked out better this way. So I said, Jeff, you're gonna take these guys out, you're gonna start yelling at them, doing all this stuff, and you're just gonna circle like a hawk, and we're just gonna shoot it as many times as we can from your point of view, from Melanie's point of view, from Henry's point of view. And Jeff, being a real pro, he knew every time he circled, he did it the same way. And I thought in editing, oh crap, this is gonna be a nightmare, because I had to make the decision so quickly. I really wasn't paying attention to what Jeff
Mhm.
was doing. I was just making sure it looked good. I had a little portable monitor, and
Mhm.
Robert's shooting it, and I'm like, move a little bit here, move a little bit down there. Can you get over the shoulder? And
Yep.
we're doing it all so fast. That it wasn't until I got in the edit, I'm like, dang, Jeff Weber is hitting every spot the same time, and it made for a much more interesting dynamic, because now you're moving and you got characters coming up and far
Yep.
away. And if I had shot it the way I storyboarded it probably would have been much, much duller.
And that
Um,
moment seemed a lot from what I remember. It was such an energetic moment that it seemed
Yeah.
that shakiness and the intensity of it all and it
Made it
just
much better.
actually, yeah, it lent to
Yeah.
that moment, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was a happy accident. By running out of time, we had to make a decision that actually made the film better, in my opinion. But yeah, getting back to the edit. So I typically do a first pass, kind of rough it out, or I give half to Andrew and I take half and we rough it out together. Andrew is my partner who he's a creative partner that lives up in Chicago, and we do a lot of projects together. In fact, he was just here. We were scouting a new location. He just flew out today. But we rough it out. I usually do the final edit. And then Andrew, he did the sound pass on it. So it was pretty straightforward. Did I answer your question? I don't know.
No, you absolutely
Yeah.
did. I wanted to get into kind of the sound part again, which you brought up earlier. You said the gentleman who actually, I was about to say storyboard, but scored it out, right? So,
Right.
so you send him the rough edit. The sound is coming while you're editing. I mean, how does so
Are
now
you
the
talking about the music
collaboration part?
or?
Yeah. The collaboration part is really interesting to me. So it's a two-parter actually.
Right.
Number one is, I love the fact that Andrew's in Chicago, because I'd love you to talk to this brave new world that we live in, where we don't have to all be in the same city at the same time, and how we can still be collaborative.
Right.
And number two, I'd love you to talk about, again, also the collaboration with the sound, and by sound I mean like the score and how that came together. And even though it was, because I love sound guys. Like sound guys to me are their own little version of geeky, right? Like they'll go in and they'll record all these weird sounds, and the next thing you know, right, you have a T-Rex voice, even though we have no idea what a T-Rex sounds like, right? So, but yeah, talk to me about kind of the collaboration that happens when you are in different places, and then the collaboration that happened with the composer as well, because I kind of held on that moment where you said we had a temp track, but normally I edit to a temp track, but this, you know, this wonderful, you know, flower almost bloomed in terms of sound. So two-parter right there.
So in terms of collaboration, I actually really enjoy working with other creative people. And so I did a project with my good friend Zane years ago. Zane's an effects guy and also a director and editor and producer. And we basically synced Dropbox accounts with all the footage. And so we could do we could send stuff back and forth quickly, do a pass, do sound mixes and so forth. And so that's the way Andrew and I work. That worked so well for Zane and I that I just continued that process. So we make a master Dropbox folder of the film, project files, source files, all that stuff. We sync it up and we just kind of go back and forth on that. So that's how we collaborate. And we'll get on the phone and we'll chat about, you know, I want this a little tighter, I want this move a little faster, I want to linger on this moment a little bit, or maybe there's a sound in your head that you're planning to put in. You say, I need to let that breathe a little bit because I've got this idea I forgot to tell you about. And so that's kind of how the collaboration goes in terms of post. But you know, getting back to Steven, I've hired him a number of times for projects. And like I said, when I was editing it, I do like to edit to temp tracks, even though I know those are going to change. It helps you find the rhythm of the scene sometimes.
Got it. Understood.
And it helps you know, if it's an emotional scene, do I need the music? Do I not need the music? Does the music make it too over the top? And so I had a piece of music that I referenced for her monologue because I was looking for this sort of ethereal kind of feel. And I had sort of a tech beat in the beginning that I wanted to establish the mood of the tone of the film. That was all I had. And so the way Steven and I work is I just call him up and we talk it through and I tell him, you know, he asked me a bunch of questions. You know, what's the tone of the film? Does it feel like it's a tech track, dance, metal? Is it classical? You know, what do you, is there an idea you have? And in this particular case, I said, other than those two moments, you can change them, but that's what I'm looking for. That's a guide for you. Other than that, I got nothing.
Got it.
And he's like, good. I said, I told him, I said, you know, this is just you know, it's kind of a passion project. We're doing it for fun.
Right.
Feel free to do something you want to do that since I'm not telling you specifically what I want.
Yep.
You know, do something you want to do.
Yeah. Use it to stretch your wings, sort of. Right.
And I gotta say, he really knocked it out of the park. He came up with these weird sort of moments that, I mean, it all sounds very musical. Right. But his way into it was really interesting. And yeah, he's a good guy. He did good work.
So what's next for this project? I saw you guys in a couple more festivals.
Yeah, I think we're getting close to our festival run. We've got a few more coming up. We've been lucky. We've won a good number of awards. And you know, I think you know, we're already, you know, working on the next thing we want to do. We're putting some feature ideas together and some other shorts.
So expansion of this, or it's just
no,
one
and
done. We liked it. We enjoyed it. Okay.
We had a couple of people approach us about turning it into some type of feature. I don't see it as a feature. It's just so specific. I mean, maybe
how about
there's an
episodic? Because I'll tell you my 2 cents for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I saw very strong similarities to The Blacklist.
Oh, interesting.
Especially in
I love that show. That's a great show.
The sociopathic father, but loves his daughter, but in the end he takes her over, right? Like she starts becoming, I actually saw that where it's like, I was like, I wonder if they're going to use this as some kind of a pilot. By the way, if you sell it, I would like my 10%. Thank you very much.
So when do we start writing?
But that's what I was like, wow, this could be a really great pilot because the daughter flips. Or doesn't flip or whatever, but you know, in a perfect world flips and then they go, or there is this escapade to different story or different towns with different stories and you know, their relationship, the depths of it, you know, explodes or doesn't. And then down the road, she is or she isn't you know, I mean, there were so many avenues, but I saw an episodic. So that's my 2 cents.
No, that's it. That's very interesting. This is why I like to collaborate with people. They come up with new ideas. No, that's good. I like that.
So yeah, bring a girl in. That's all I have to say. So yeah. So next projects you were telling me you're starting to noodle, get stuff together.
Yeah, I've my literary manager has a couple of scripts of mine that he's taking out just the last couple of weeks he took out, and so
Mhm.
we're hopefully we'll have some luck there. I'm writing something with Andrew, another project that we think we can produce on our own, as a low budget, indie feature. And just yeah, just writing and working and noodling
Creating
around ideas. Yeah,
and
exactly.
and mostly in Austin, I'm assuming, and
My manager's in LA, and so I'm out there, you know, few times a year for meetings and
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. But all the product, I mean, on the corporate side, I've shot in LA and shot, on the corporate and commercial work we do in Nashville and places like that. All the independent film stuff we do here in Austin, just because we're here and
Yeah.
we're doing them on small budgets, and
Yep.
so everything's been local in
Yep.
the narrative world.
So talk to me just really quickly, because I think you actually have a really great pulse on this, because to me, this old school formula of creative being in Los Angeles, and maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot, is not the case anymore, right? So talk to me about the scene in Austin a little bit. I think that's how it's grown, how is it from an independent or creative standpoint? Would love people to just hear
Well,
that.
it's interesting because Austin is very film friendly, and
Well, I
you were
mean,
talking,
obviously South by Southwest, right?
yeah,
Like
South by Southwest, Austin
Robert
Film
Rodriguez is
Festival,
down.
yeah,
Like, I mean,
yeah,
the great independent grandfathers, for lack of a better word. I mean,
right.
if Robert Rodriguez heard this, he'd be like, "Hold up, grandfather? Who you calling grandfather?" This is like the point, right? Like when I think of like the founders of the independent movement, but that's
Yeah,
not to say
Richard
so.
Linklater's here, and
Mhm.
Rodriguez. Yeah, a lot of great talent, and it's very film friendly town. I mean, Zane and I, who I mentioned earlier, we were shooting a series of commercials once because you and I talked earlier about getting things for free and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And we had shot, it was all these, soft and fuzzy slow motion hand holding in the blue bonnets kind of commercial. And when we were done, we were leaving, and Zane said, "Man, I wish we would have gotten a sunset shot." And we happened to be driving by this restaurant out on the lake, which is known for the big sunset view. It's a huge, giant, 3-4 story place.
Mhm.
And Zane said, "I wonder if they'd let us use their balcony." And I'm like, "It's a working restaurant." I said, "No." He goes, "I'm just going to ask." We walk up there and they said, "The top floor is under construction because we're remodeling." They said, "Just go up there and do what you want." And it's like, that's what's cool about Austin is people, they're just, yeah, they didn't charge us. They didn't ask us for waivers, insurance, stuff. They just go shoot your your sunset shot. When you're done, just say goodbye when you leave.
Yeah.
And so that's what's cool about Austin. And there are, a lot of TV shows that have come and gone here,
Mhm.
a lot of features come through here. We were just, Andrew and I and my wife Dita were just scouting a studio for another project that's outside of town. They just built, I think I just got emails from 2 new studios that built
Wow.
in the area. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of production and a lot of really talented people. The crews are pretty deep, so that's
Okay.
good.
Okay. And most of them you feel are Austin, like LA transplants, California transplants, or just
Most of the ones, well, that's really not true. Most of the ones I know because I've been here so long are Austin Bay, I
based?
mean
Yeah.
Austin originals, I suppose you could say, or
Yeah.
moved here a long time ago. But there are a lot of really talented people. I've been getting resumes from people who've moved from LA and different
Mhm.
places like that. Some really, really talented folks that have moved here. Um, Everything from DPs to sound mixers to post-production people. So it is kind of weird. I mean, I drive around now and I mean, about 1 out of 10 cars has a California license plate, so it's changing a lot right before my eyes.
How
Yeah.
long have you been out there? Just out of curiosity.
Oh gosh, I've been here since late 80s, I think, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were some of the original gangsters, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, we were all running around stealing locations, making movies, and doing what we could to just have fun and create and yeah, yeah. It's been Austin's been good to me. I can't complain.
So, great segue actually, because the other thing that I love to kind of poke at and learn is the journey and the story of the director
Mhm,
themselves.
mhm.
So, started that obviously you came to Austin in the '80s. So tell me how you got pulled into directing? Like, what was that always something you wanted to do? Was
Yeah,
it
when I grew up, my dad always had cameras around, and so I was comfortable with. He shot a lot of 35 millimeter stills, and so I was comfortable with cameras. And then one day I'd seen a movie about a kid making his own movie, and I thought, I didn't know a kid could do that. I was probably 8, and my dad worked at the community college up the road, and he was a teacher and an administrator there. And they had a media department, and so he checked out a Super 8 camera and came home with some film and said, "Go make your movie." So my first film
a
was The
little bit like the
Case.
Fablemans? It sounds like it's like,
Yeah, yeah. I cast my brother, my mom, and my dad, and my friend down the road, and it was called The Case of the Missing Jewels. And it was
very
it
Nancy
was just
Drew, very Nancy
very
Drew,
very
or the
Nancy
Hardy
Drew.
Boys, or whatever that was. I
Yeah,
remember.
I was a big Encyclopedia Brown fan, and all that. But anyway, so I shot that, and I was just like, this is really, really fun. And so, I just started making films with my friends, and then decided to, I always knew that's what I wanted to do.
Got it. Okay.
And so I just made a bunch of shorts and came down to UT and made a bunch of more projects there. And when I got out of school, I couldn't get a job, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? And decided just to start my own company, which sounded crazy at the time, but I've been very, very fortunate, and been doing that ever since. Yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
Cool. So what do you like to direct? I mean, obviously this was a horror. I mean, there's like the work stuff, right? Which is the commercials
Yeah.
and the stuff that pays the bills. But like, what's the artistic yearning in you in terms of?
I go through different phases, I suppose. The first film I did was a comedy, and actually won at the Austin Film Festival, and that got me a directing for hire gig on another movie, which we screened up at Slam Dance, and that got me a director for hire for another movie, which really was interesting. That was the first thriller I had done, and so then I kind of went down that path for a while. So I was writing comedy for a while. Now I'm kind of in a horror thriller mode. I like that kind of genre right now. So it really just depends. I mean, ultimately, and I think you and I had this conversation when you were on our podcast. It really comes down to a really intriguing story.
Yep.
The story, whether it's comedy or whether it's thriller or horror or drama, there's got to be a hook that pulls you in and really makes the story feel urgent, I suppose is the word, that you really need to know what's going to happen. And whether it's, does he get the girl, or does she get the guy, or do they solve the crime, whatever it is, it's about good storytelling.
So what, in your opinion, and I'm going to go back to the podcast. So for those who don't know, Jeff actually graciously invited me on his podcast. So not that this is returning the favor, I promise you it's not. but it is. But we did talk in depth and about kind of a great story, and for Skiff, in fact, I think year one that was actually on our sizzle reel was like, we start with a story, right? And so tell me, what makes a great story to you?
Oh, that's a tough question. A great question, but a tough question. I think what makes a great story is something that has a what's the phrase I'm looking for? An only to discover moment in the pitch for me.
Define let's go deeper on that.
Okay. I'll try to explain this without giving away the scripts I have out right now, because they're sort of conceptual that way. So an only to discover moment for me, and I'm not saying this is the only way in, but this is just one of the tools I use, should be plot driven, but it should also be emotionally driven. So you have the character arc that gets through the plot, but also the character arc that transforms him in some way, him or her in some way. So I'll try to come up with an example. It's probably not going to be a great example, but take something like Rosemary's Baby. She, you have a character who's in love, and they live in this apartment, and she becomes pregnant only to discover that she's giving birth to, this
Satan
demon. So,
spawn.
yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. Um, and ideally that only to discover moment and that conflict will also change them as a person. It doesn't have to. I mean, a good plot driven movie is great, but a plot driven movie that also transforms the character, to me, is more interesting.
Yep.
You know, we talked about this briefly on the podcast. So one of my favorite films is Casablanca, and here you start with a guy who's broken. He's not going to stick his neck out for nobody. And in the process of, this girl comes back that he was in love with, and she left. He doesn't know why she left. And, you have a plot about, the papers and how do you get out of Casablanca. But at the end of the movie, he changes. He becomes a better person.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by stories like that. And they don't, I think it's more uplifting if they change for the better, but they don't have to. There are movies
they can be
that
the anti-hero.
Yeah, there are movies that work that can have kind of a dark ending. But if it's the right ending that makes sense, it's still satisfying.
Yeah.
So that's what I look for is a.
So you're more character driven, story driven, not necessarily, which I already know the answer to, but not necessarily like explosions or big special effects or things of that nature.
Well,
correct?
What I do is first I get an idea that intrigues me. And so I'm story driven first, plot driven first. I find the hook first, something that I'm really excited about. Then I try to figure out what the full movie is based on that. And then if I have a character in mind, then I have to figure out how do I change that character so he's the right person for that story. Does that make sense? If like the script that we have going out right now, I can't talk too much about it, but the main character loses a daughter. We don't know if he had something to do with it or if he's innocent or whatever, but the plot is related to that, but it's a horror thriller plot. But in the process, he has to resolve that loss. That makes sense. Yep. So by giving him, it's kind of hard to explain without going into detail about the plot, but by giving him by him being the one that lost the daughter, it makes him the right choice for that story, because now he can resolve the plot and he can resolve his personal issues of loss. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, yeah, it does. So from a kind of a directorial preference, and I the reason I'm asking this question, let me preface it a little bit, is because I'm a director who I am more about the actors and the characters, and because again, I come from a theater background. So for me, it's really about how do I get them to the levels with the nuances and the little moments that define or can actually say everything regardless of the words, right? So that's where I geek out as a director. That's what I push to as a director. There are directors who are more about the camera and the angle and stuff. What kind of a director are you?
I like to think I'm a little both. Because I definitely love equipment and gear and cameras and like I said, I've been editing for a long time. So I do try to storyboard ahead of time. I know what I want to shoot. I know what the edit's going to be like, more or less. What I prefer to do on the acting side is find the actors that are right for the part, who are really, really talented. And then I just have to dial them in a little bit for what I'm looking for. So, I think it's more a matter of letting them bring what they have to the table and then me making the adjustments to get what I want out of it. So I don't know if that really answered your question or not, but
no, it does. It does.
I mean, it's funny. I've heard directors who, want to get the cast and then just they work and they come up with this and they do that and they they kind of play around together to figure it out. And then
Mhm.
I've heard other directors say, I just want someone who knows what they're doing and I don't want to have to worry about it,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is, and
Exactly.
both
Exactly.
views are valid. It just depends on how you want to work, I suppose.
Yeah. And that's what I was trying to get at, is like, what is your
Yeah.
style, right? We all have a style, and all of us have a and that's why what we bring, I think, is our eye, right? And our
Right.
vision to
Right.
that. So that's what I was trying to figure out. It's like, where do you lean in the ingredients that make up, Jeff's directorial world?
Yeah. I guess if you asked it that way, I would say I lean more on the technical side first,
Okay.
and then on the the acting side second, because I have to figure it out in my head first, and maybe that's
Mhm.
just the way I work. I have to figure out, what does this movie look like? That's why I storyboard. That's why I try to figure all out, what we're going to do. What's
Mhm.
the dynamic of the scene?
Mhm.
Then I try to find the actors that can fulfill those moments, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Once I find them, we will have conversations and talk, or we'll do table reads and rehearse. And then, because they'll bring ideas to the table, they might bring a number of ideas, and they're like, which one do you like? And
Mhm.
so I give my feedback and dial them in on what I see for like Jeff Weber, for example. He really wanted to do this part because it's so different than what he normally does. And so when we first did the table read, he had some big ideas on, making him more making him a bigger character, bigger acting and things like that. But to me, what makes this idea work is that this guy is just an everyday guy,
Yeah.
just a charming guy you can meet, and you don't know he's got this. That's why. But if we start there, even though it's a short film, it's 18 minutes or so. Now we have a place for him to go.
Mhm.
Now he can get dark. And so I told Jeff, I said, I want you to play this just like you play all your good guy roles,
Mm.
and then let him go bad. And he's like, oh, now I get it, and so that minor adjustment took his idea of being a more darker character,
Yep.
but it saved it for the end.
Yep.
So now he's got kind of an arc, if that makes
Got it.
sense. Yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
So since you're you lean more technical, I'm going to
Mhm.
ask a technical question for
Sure.
kind of the camera geeks out there. Would you shoot on?
We shot on red on that shoot. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I've been shooting that film. We shot red. I've done a couple things on Black Magic. I shoot a lot of red camera. Um, did some stuff on Airy, but yeah, that project was red.
Okay. Last question is, up and coming directors, independent directors out there, advice that you would give colleagues or even newbies coming in.
Oh boy, I think I get that question a lot, and I think honestly, it's such a simple answer, but there's no reason you can't just go out and do stuff. Um, you know, like a friend of mine said the other day, there's no reason you can't greenlight yourself. Just
Right.
go out and do it, because equipment's not that expensive. I mean, I've seen amazing
Yep.
stuff on iPhones.
Yep.
I think the more you shoot, because the thing is, and you know this as a director, as you make films, you start to discover the limitations of the technical side of it.
And it's
And
practice, right? It's like anything else. It's
exactly,
practice, practice. You start seeing the nuances, seeing the shots, seeing it's just that practice, that finessing. And I've heard that from, like, for example, painters, like they'll go in and just start painting because
yeah,
they're like, it's the practice that makes you get better.
yeah. You need to do, in my opinion, two things. You need to find your voice, whatever
Mhm.
that is, whether you're a visual person, whether you're a storyteller, whatever your storytelling angle is, you need to find your voice. And you can only do that by um, making lots of things, lots of short films, writing a lot, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And I think the other thing is find your voice and then learn to think on your feet. Because in film, like you said, things go wrong,
Yep.
you know. Um, and so if you can learn to think on your feet and fix those things as they go, that's just part of your toolkit, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
And that's
And that-
life, right?
yeah.
Isn't it? Like, I mean,
No,
as you
exactly.
practice
Yeah.
that, you practice just
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
in general, right?
Right. Right. Right.
It's your story within the story to a degree. The crazy
Yeah.
part, right?
True enough. True enough. Yeah.
So just do it is what you're saying at the end
I
of the
think
day.
so. I
You're a
think
Nike
so.
commercial.
Yeah.
Hopefully
And
they don't sue us for that.
yeah. And the other thing is, by doing that, you start to build your tribe.
Yeah.
You start to build people, because I work with a lot of the same people,
Mhm.
because you find out who's going to be on time, who's not. You
Yep.
find out
Yep.
who brings something to the table that you didn't
Who's
expect.
reliable, who you can
Yeah.
count on, who will
Yeah.
show up, who
Yeah.
will, yeah,
And
exactly.
who does good work, and who you like to work with. Nobody wants to work
Yep.
with people who are, a pain. So by getting out and doing it, like I said, you start to build that tribe, and next thing you know, they're calling you to, hey, I got this idea, let's work on this thing, or yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do also with Skiff, is try to build the larger tribe within the smaller tribes and bring this all together and network and talk and be creative and ideate and all that fun stuff too. So, can't thank you enough for joining our tribe on that journey and bringing some knowledge, some wisdom, some thoughts, some commentary as well. Because ultimately I think it is that exchange of ideas. It's that flow of energy. And so hopefully we could give you that in the project and the team in return.
Well, that's the great thing about, finding a film festival that you like the people and you respect what they're trying to do. That's just building your tribe even more. And I think that's one of the things I liked about Skiff, is that you all seem really dedicated to pushing into indie film, telling stories and connecting people. And I think that's cool. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. So Jeff, thank you. Thank you for being there at Skiff 2022. Hopefully we'll have some of your future projects in Skiff as well. Don't know what year. But thank you for being a part of it. Thank you, for joining us on this episode. And any last parting thoughts, I guess, before we go to cut?
Gosh, just like we said earlier, people just should go out and make their movies.
That's right. And so to end, like, actually one of my favorite is Werner Herzog's 24 Rules for Filmmaking. And he said, day one is the point of no return.
True. I heard
and,
Oh, no, go ahead.
then the other one, a couple other ones that I loved is I think I'm going to make this into a t-shirt. He said, walk with bolt cutters everywhere, because that made me think of like getting your shot. No permits, doesn't matter. We have our location.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Done, and then another one subsequent to that was spending a night in jail if you got the perfect shot is well worth it. So,
yeah.
And I was like, that is independent filmmaking.
I like that. That's pretty good. Yeah.
Except
yeah.
I'm not very good with his very droll German accent. All right. Well, cool. Thank you for joining us, Jeff. Wish you and the gang great things, and we'll see you at the next Skiff very soon.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.